This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be a substitute for mental health services.
Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer, member FINRA, SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Financial Wellness are not affiliated.
Welcome to Financial Wellness. I'm Stephanie, along with my childhood friend Chad. This is the place where we unravel the intricate connections between financial well-being and mental health. In each episode, we explore the complexities of personal finance and how our monetary choices impact our emotional and mental states.
Here is where we also discuss and learn how to get better at everything from budgeting to investments to insurance. We share personal stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you navigate those connections between your financial stability and mental wellness. Make sure to show some love by liking and following us. It really helps a lot. So let's get started. Did you want to go first?
Our mental well-being is directly linked with our financial well-being. We can bring some normalizing and even some humor to these situations. You know, we're both from New Orleans. We like to bring a little fun to the table.
Yeah. It becomes empowering and it becomes something that you control versus something that controls you. Hey, Steph.
Hey, Dad. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Very good. I've been thinking a lot about our last episode because you and I are both living it.
We are living it. We are
Yeah.
living it.
Yeah.
Well, what I was really excited about was after the last episode, we felt like we needed to keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
And one of the things we mentioned offline was that we should probably dig more into the numbers of what we were talking about, which for me meant I got to go and play around with Excel and crank numbers in a spreadsheet.
And for me, that meant that I got you to do the spreadsheet work while I benefited from all the knowledge and learning that came about.
Well, part of my problem is going back to the freak on the sheets coffee mug that my wife got me for Christmas. I could really get lost in a spreadsheet for a very long time. And even after we finish up our conversation today, I'm going to go back and play with this some more and use our own numbers, my own personal numbers in here as it relates to costs of home and interest rates and your all-in payments and fees and how those numbers actually impact not only your cash flow, but
Yeah.
also the profitability of the home in the event that you do sell it. And at what point in the future does that home purchase add value and is a profitable investment? So I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm also excited to nerd out inside of this spreadsheet. Hopefully, the conversation that we have comes across because it will be a hefty amount of numbers today. But what I would encourage people to do for today's episode is get a little notepad and write down some of these numbers and then go back and apply them to your own situation.
Well, I think you've just embodied the difference between you and I in that you get super excited to play with the numbers, and that is fun for you. I, being the mental health side of things, it evokes stress and worry for me to think of these giant investments. But when I also think about home, like I said in the last episode, it's I have such an emotional attachment to my home. So and actually love being home, love, nesting and all of those aspects. So yeah, fun and Excel spreadsheet do not exist in the same sentence for me.
Well, but you make a good point, and that is the numbers are important and the numbers have
Yes.
impact to your bottom line. But when it comes to purchasing a home, there is a significant emotional impact. There are massive emotional considerations like location. Where do you want to live? Do you want to live in a neighborhood that or in an area that has good schools? Do you want to live in a neighborhood that is safe?
Right.
One of the things that we've been looking at a lot are crime statistics. You know,
Mhm.
is the area a safe place to live? What are some of those other considerations? Besides location and crime, square footage. You're in the process of moving right now, right? So you're considering all those different things, location, space, um, home design, right?
Yes, yes. Well, and I think also too, when it comes to location, we talked about home purchasing and home rental. You may be in a location that you can't afford except to be a renter. So that's, going to be such a huge factor. But yeah, square footage, I'm about to downsize. I
Hmm.
mean, not because I want to, but because the market I'm moving to is more expensive than the market I live in now. So location, square footage, all of those things can be largely determined by where you're going.
For true. Now it sounds like now you can really tell where I grew up. For true.
For true, for real.
No, but you're absolutely right. You look at some of these places depending on your state, depending on your region, depending on how close to the center of a city that you're
Right,
trying to live, right? In our case, we're able to get a little bit more house for the price because we're living in a suburb or
right.
moving to a suburb. So you're able to get more house for the price compared to if you were living in, say, in a downtown area, right? So all those things vary, but the downtown area may be more suited to your lifestyle. If you want to get
Right.
out and walk to coffee shops and little shopping areas, that might be more conducive to how you like to live versus, somebody like me who tends to be more of a homebody.
Me too.
And yeah, so all those things are
And
considerations that are important.
yeah, and even just like who lives in your neighborhood that you're looking at. Because younger people, you might think of younger people living more in the center of town and having walkable lifestyle. But like my neighborhood is a lot of young families,
Right,
whereas it used to be retirees. But
right. You
as
know,
they've kept their homes up, so young people are moving in now.
it's interesting. In my old house, before we moved to this house, as we were going through the process of selling that house, I had old neighbors who had been there, old meaning they had been there a long time, not that they were old, but neighbors that had been there a long time. They were adults. And as I was planning to move, those neighbors were also in the process of selling their houses.
Oh,
And
wow.
two of those houses, these young people moved in, young, like college age.
Oh,
The
wow.
house across the street from me, the owner sold the house or he allowed his college age son to move in, and the college age son brought with him three roommates.
Mm.
And that was a little bit of a red flag for me because I'm thinking college students and parties across the street. And what was the movie? Old School.
Right.
Like
Right.
I'd be trying to go across the street to go to frat parties with the college kids. But the same thing happened two or three doors down from that house. A bunch of young people
Oh,
moved
wow.
in as well. And, I nothing against young folks, but I wasn't trying to be in an environment where we felt like we were going to have to tell people to be quiet all the time or having parties all the time or having all kinds of people and traffic up and down the street all the time. It's just
Yeah.
something I wasn't really interested in.
Yeah, you had young kids who needed to be at school in the morning.
Right. and old people that needed to get up and go to work in the morning.
I hear it.
So, but
I hear
other
that.
considerations too, like I mentioned how you live in the home. Like for me, it's very important to have space to have an office because I work from home.
Right.
But also, also having a backyard, a place where we can gather and barbecue. I like to get out and smoke meat. So I want to, I want to
I
smoke.
have that yard for smoking meat.
I need room for my smoker. That was, I think I mentioned that was a consideration for one of the houses that we did look at. It didn't have a big enough backyard. And the
Yeah.
first thing I thought of was my barbecue grill and my smoker are not going to fit back here.
Right.
And as much as I love the house, those are very important ways that we live. I grill probably 3 to 4 days a week.
Oh, wow.
And some of that is just how we make our dinner, like grilled chicken and whatever, or grilled this or smoked that. I don't smoke as often as I grill, but that's neither here nor there.
It takes a little
Uh,
longer.
yeah. So those are all considerations, but the big consideration and what we're talking about today is cost,
Yeah.
right? And we kind of wanted to get into the weeds a little bit on cost today. One of the we had mentioned before there are a ton of references online. One of the references that I was looking at this week was a NerdWallet article that just talks about and breaks down some of those costs, all of those costs really that
Mhm.
we have to consider when we're buying a home.
Yeah. After our conversation last week about purchasing versus renting, I really thought about a lot of these hidden costs that you know a lot about because you work in the field, but it reminded me, having worked at a university and really worked with, first generation college students, it reminded me of that in the sense that if you don't have a really good person to walk you through all of these hidden costs, you can really you can be blindsided by the upfront costs, the fact that your monthly payment is not just what you're paying towards your mortgage. And then, of course, like we talked about last week, repairs and different things that you have to put into your house on an annual basis. So
Right.
I am really grateful that we're going through these numbers, especially because I am about to buy another house.
Yeah.
Say
Well,
that like I'm gonna have two.
yeah.
I'm gonna sell a house and buy a house.
And let me clarify for this conversation, I'm like everybody else. I didn't know all these numbers and I'm still learning all these numbers. I'm going through the process with you, so I'm seeing a lot of these numbers inside of the paperwork that we're receiving.
Yeah.
But this is not my area of expertise. I'm not a realtor, I'm not a mortgage broker. So understanding these numbers, I've had to go back and kind of do some research and get a real understanding of what these numbers really mean. So yeah, I'm kind of going through it just like everybody else at this point. They're just like
But
you.
it's
We're in the same
fun
boat.
for you. But that spreadsheet stuff is so fun.
Oh, I love it. Well, for me, doing the spreadsheet, I always feel like spreadsheets tell a good story
Hmm.
and they're helpful for me
Yes.
and how my brain processes things. So, I think the first thing that we want to talk about, the all those one-time costs. So when you buy a house, your costs are really broken down into your one-time costs, your upfront costs, and then you have your ongoing costs. So your one-time costs will be, your down payment and your closing costs and fees associated with those closing costs. And then you have your ongoing costs, and that's going to be your ongoing mortgage payment, your ongoing HOA fees if you have an HOA, your property taxes, your insurance, your mortgage insurance, and some of those ongoing fees. Not to mention, like you said, the repairs that will pop up here and there. But what we want to do today was just kind of break down each one of these items one by one. Now, again, referencing the NerdWallet article, what I liked about that article was that it broke down what the national median price of a home was. Now, these numbers will be as of September of 2022, but they're close enough.
2023, 2023.
2022, 2022.
So a
So
year and a half ago.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So September of 2022. And what the article said was that the national median price of a home was $384,800. And then it varies by region, right? So in the Northeast, now one of the things we had talked about was how in the Northeast, it's renting is kind of normalized, right? And a big part of that is the average or the median home price in the Northeast was $747,000, you
A
know,
lot of money.
double the national average. But going back to the median price. So the national median price is $384,800. So that's kind of the baseline number that we're going to use for everything that we talk about today. So once you, as a home buyer, the first thing that we typically look at is the price of the home, right? I mean, I know you're doing that, right? Looking at
Yes.
home prices in areas and how's that going?
Yeah, it's not fun at all
Yeah,
in any way.
yeah.
Because yeah, yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah. So as we go through the process of looking for a house, the first thing that we're typically looking at is the price of the home in those areas where we want to live. We've decided on the type of place we want to live. We've looked at the interiors and all that, and then we look at the home price and we make a determination on whether or not that home price is in our budget. And then the next consideration is the type of loan that we're going to get, right? So depending on your credit history and your credit scores and everything else, there are different types of loans that people can get. And your loan and your mortgage rate, that's all going to be impacted by your financial position, right? It's going to be impacted by your credit score and your finances, how much money you have set aside. It's going to be impacted by the location of the house and whether or not you're a first time buyer. So all these different factors determine what your loan rate will be and the type of loan that you would get. And there are different types of loans, the conventional loan, FHA loans, all those different types of loans. But in the end, all those kind of determine what your type of loan is going to be and the interest rate that you would receive. So I want to go back actually to the different fees associated with, well, actually, nope, we're in the right place. So your type of loan, and then your down payment. And again, your down payment will vary based on, your financial position and the type of loan that you receive. So a conventional loan, which just means that's a loan that's not backed by any federal government agencies, will allow a minimum of a 3% down payment. The average down payment is about 7% nationally, according to the NerdWallet article. So if you're purchasing a home that's $384,800, your down payment at 7% would be just south of $27,000. It would be 26,936, right? $26,936. So big consideration for folks when they're buying a house is making sure that they have the down payment saved up to purchase that home. Now, when you start talking about stress and financial planning, making sure that you have that money set aside may cause people to feel a certain type of way.
Yes. No, I think large chunks of money like that cause anyone to have a stress. And people might be aiming for a specific percentage of their projected home cost, but they also may not be thinking of the other upfront costs that are going to be included in the purchase of the home. And I feel like that could be an incredibly stressful moment for someone very much last minute if they don't have a really good mortgage broker who really walks them through it.
That's a
Oh,
really
closing
good point.
costs. Oh,
Well,
Chad, I
no,
hate those
that,
things.
yes, that's a really good point, though,
Yeah,
because I can assure you that a lot of folks, myself included, as we were planning for the home purchase, we were planning, making plans for the down payment and everything else, not realizing that we would have to bring additional money to the table for the closing costs. And I want to say that that wasn't a consideration the last couple times I bought a house, or either the closing costs were just sort of factored into the loan and I didn't really think much about it because I
right,
think they just rolled it into the loan. This house that we're purchasing now, we are actually going to pay the closing costs out of pocket because there's some incentives with the home builder. We can actually buy down the interest rate, which we can talk about later. But it made sense to bring that extra cash to the close the loan. So people will have that opportunity in some cases to bring the extra cash or roll it into the loan, depending on if you have that cash available.
right.
But you're right. Closing costs is a tough one.
And it
But
feels like, just as I don't go around buying houses all the time, it feels like this unknowable number. But I think you said there's a specific range, but it's pretty wide range of percentage.
right, they can vary from 2 to 6% of the loan, or two to 6% of the value of the home,
I mean, that's a
and
pretty big range.
it's a range. Yeah. So on a house that's 384,000 or 385,000, that number can vary anywhere from close to $7,700 to as much as $23,000.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's a big range there. So if you're doing a 26 or $27,000 down payment, and then also coming to the table with another $23,000 just in closing costs, that can add some angst for folks, right? the Now, what makes up closing costs? That's going to be, they will prorate your property taxes. There'll be prorated homeowners fees, prorated HOA fees. Some cases, the closing costs will cover the cost of the inspection, the cost of the appraisal. You'll have your broker fees in there. So a ton of other fees kind of factored into that closing cost. So that number will vary based on all those different costs that go into purchasing a home. But again, it's sort of an unknown number. But when you factor in for that baseline $384,000 home, you've got now a down payment close to $27,000. You've got, if your closing costs vary somewhere between 2 and 6%, let's just say you're paying 4% in closing costs, you're now paying close to $15,000 or a little bit over $15,000 in closing costs. That brings your initial out of pocket payment, your one time out of pocket payment, just under $45,000. So, from a planning standpoint, when you're purchasing a home, on average, that's what people need to be prepared to bring to the table.
And that's a sizable chunk of money just to have lying around.
Yeah, it's good.
Or rolled over from a sale of a home or what have you. But it is
Right,
a sizable chunk of money. 15,000 of which approximately is not going toward your home. Like if we're talking investments, like
right,
you're paying
right.
much of that money in fees.
Right. The down payment does go to the actual price of the home. The closing costs do not. And so for a first time home buyer who doesn't have a home to sell, that is money that they have to plan to bring to the table. Now, there are a ton of first time home buyer programs and some of these other federal programs that will assist folks with purchasing a home. But for now, we're just talking about these baseline numbers. So roughly $45,000 is what folks have to bring to the table as sort of an all-in one-time cost. Okay. So once we get past that, then we go to the ongoing costs, or
There's always just costs, so
or
many
the
costs.
or the ongoing investment in your home, which
Yes.
some of those dollars paid actually go toward the value of your home, paying down the principal on the home. Other costs go toward what we talked about before, property taxes, homeowners association fees, mortgage insurance if your down payment is less than 20% of the price of the home. So mortgage insurance. And then you have, other ongoing costs potentially depending on where you live or depending on the house. We talked about repairs and being, always being prepared to cover those types of expenses.
Yeah. And you're paying so much on the interest early on, right?
Right. So let's talk about interest. So
Ugh.
according to NerdWallet, and this number varies, but currently, the average 30-year mortgage interest is 6.78%. Okay. So on a $384,000 home, and after the 26 or $27,000 down payment, you would be financing a loan for $357,000, just under $358,000. Okay. So that principal and interest payment on that loan at 6.78% would be $2,328. That would be the amount of the mortgage. That's what you're paying every month that's going toward the principal and the interest on that loan. Okay. So a big consideration for folks is, can I afford my mortgage? How is that impacting my cash flow? Right? Can I afford that? But hold on.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. So these next numbers are going to be relatively high, I feel, but according to the article, the average HOA, if you have an HOA, so some folks may not have a homeowners association fee, but if you do, nationally, the average HOA is $331 per month.
Good night. That is so a lot.
Yeah. And if you have mortgage insurance averages about 2% of the what you're paying on the home or the home value. So that averages out on a $384,000 home, roughly about $596 a month.
Wow, that's a
Okay.
lot. Let me ask you a question about that. Does it roll off once you have 20% equity in the house?
Yes.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah. So with a conventional loan, once you get to 20% equity, that mortgage insurance goes away. And that's really why you don't have it if you bring 20% down in a down payment, because you're essentially buying that 20% equity in the home. But assuming you do have the mortgage insurance, and in this scenario where we only paid 7% of the home price in a down payment, your total all-in monthly payment, your P&I, your HOA fees, your mortgage insurance, that all adds up to approximately $3,600 a month.
Which is
Okay.
a different number than what you
Right.
originally thought of when you were just looking at the price of the home
Right. When you're looking at the
and
price of the
saying,
home, your mortgage, what you're paying on the home was $2,328. But your actual out of pocket with all the other fees ends up being about $3,600. Right. So again, going back to those considerations when buying a home, can I cover this with my current income and my current cash flow?
right.
Am I going to be in a position where I can't make this payment and then run the risk of defaulting on my loan and having my home taken away? So,
Mm.
a huge consideration is cash flow and being able to not only cover the mortgage and the P&I, but also the all-in costs that you would actually be coming out of pocket.
And I'm going to translate. I know you said these terms before, but P&I is a fancy way of saying principal and interest, just
Correct.
in case.
Have I not? I didn't explain that early. I'm sorry.
If you may have, but it can't hurt to clarify it again.
Yeah. But let's talk about that because when you make your loan payment, that's actually a perfect segue. When you
Yay.
make your loan payment, your principal and interest payment goes toward both of those things, right? It helps to bring down the balance of what you owe, but you're also paying the interest, your fee that you're paying to the bank for the privilege of borrowing money from them to buy this home, right?
Yes.
So in your early years of making those payments, the majority of your payment is going to the interest, right? So just to give you an example, I ran a loan amortization program using an app. There are plenty of them on your phone. Just type in loan amortization app. You will find endless numbers of apps to use. But check this out. You ready for this number?
I am.
All right. So your monthly payment is 2328, right? $2,328 for your principal and interest. That amounts to $27,936 per year that you're paying on your mortgage. Your original loan was $357,864. At the end of the first year, after paying $27,936, guess how much your actual balance reduced by?
Oh my gosh. Probably what? $1,000?
No, more than that. 3,000, roughly $3,800. You paid 27,000, your actual balance decreased by about $3,800. So the majority of that payment, $23,000 of that payment went solely to interest and only reduced your
Painful. It's
home balance.
painful.
So the point of this is that's fine if you're going to be in the house for a long time. So, if you're planning to be in a house for, 5 years, 10 years or longer, that's fine. That's sort of the cost of doing business and buying a home.
Right.
What I also thought was interesting was I wondered, well, at what point do I get to the point where where my payment is actually going more to principal than it's going to interest? And this is
What point
assuming a
is that?
30-year loan.
Okay, 30-year loan. Got it.
So by year, according to this amortization schedule, it wasn't until year 19 that your payments were going more to your principal than to your interest.
Oh
And this
wow.
is assuming that you're not making extra payments and everything else. You're just following the original amortization schedule.
And it's interesting to really take a hard look at it because these are all things that you kind of hear when you're going through the process of buying a house. You're going to pay more interest than principal. It'll take some time before you'll be paying more principal than interest. And you hear these things, but you don't necessarily, unless you, for me at least, so spreadsheets help me to visualize. I don't love making them, but they do really help me to visualize.
Hmm.
And so just to have that knowledge, I think is really powerful because then you are going into this. We've talked so much in this podcast about awareness, and you go into the process really knowing, okay, this is where my money is going. And I am paying attention to what pieces of this payment are going to principal and what's going to interest. I
Right.
don't know. I think it's important.
Yeah, it's completely important. So right now, we're just talking about the portion of your payment that's going toward the principal and the interest and how it's impacting your overall balance. But
Right.
remember,
you're still paying that extra $1,000 or so just
Right.
for fees.
So, right. So your actual payment, which in this case, on average, and again, the actual payment will vary based on whether or not you have an HOA, whether or not you have homeowners insurance or, insurance payments or mortgage insurance, some of these other things. But
Mhm,
in this scenario, because you're paying a total of 3,600 per month, your principal and interest plus those other fees end up totaling roughly about $43,000 per year. So your P&I is roughly about 27, 28,000. Your all in out of pocket ends up being roughly about 43,000. Okay. So you're paying about an extra, you know, what is that? $16,000 in
mhm.
costs that are not going toward the equity in your home, right?
That's important to know because when we first started talking about this, we talked about homes as an investment.
Right.
So what we're talking about here is at what point is your home an investment?
Well,
I
well,
mean,
I
it's always
will.
an investment.
Right.
That is
Yeah. Yeah.
incorrect.
It's
Okay.
always an investment, but when are you going to actually start making money? So let's
When
let's
when is it possible for you to make money?
so let's talk about year one. Okay. So year
Okay.
one, we've broken down our principal and interest, ongoing payment. We've broken down the other fees, and that's where we get that $43,000 number, right? That's our ongoing, what we're paying. Don't forget, though, we had that initial one-time payment we made with the down payment and the closing costs. And that number was around $44,000 for almost $45,000. So
Yeah.
if we take that number, that's around 45,000 as the one-time payment, and we take that $43,000 number, that's kind of what we've been paying monthly to be able to live in the home. That's $88,000 that you've paid in that first year.
Wow.
Okay.
And you've gained $3,000 of equity in that first year. No, it's not equity actually, because equity is different. Wait, I'm getting this. I know that. So the equity is based on the value of your home, but
You've
you have
reduced
built,
your mortgage.
you've reduced the principal of your mortgage
Right.
$1,000
You you've
after
re
spending
right.
$88,000.
Well,
Hey,
now, now, granted, going back to what you're saying, your balance on the loan is 354,000 approximately. The original home price was 384,000. So that's about $30,000 of equity. So you've paid in so far 88,000 and you've gotten about 30,000 of equity. So, that's you're getting some equity there. So one of the things
well,
that's always fascinated me, and I have lunches with a good friend of mine, Ricky. Ricky and I coached Little League together as one of my best friends. We get together, we have lunches about once a month. Sometimes our lunches last 2 hours, sometimes they last. We had a lunch one time that lasted about 5 hours.
oh
That's neither
wow.
here nor there. That's another story for another day. But we would talk about whether or not it makes sense to rent or buy. And one of the things that's always fascinated me is if you buy a house for $384,000, okay?
Yeah.
And we know from the last episode we were talking about how going back to March of 1980, the US housing market's annualized average growth rate was 8.6%. Home values increased by 8.6% historically. Now, there's some periods where they didn't increase that much, but we'll go ahead and use that number. If your house appreciates by 8.6%, okay,
Yeah.
meaning at the end of year one, your home value grew from 384,000 to 417,000. Now, if you buy a house for 384 and you sell it for 417, that feels like you
Feels
made
like you
money.
made money.
Right. I my house grew. I made some money. But when you factor in that you've already paid in $88,000 and you still owe $354,000
Mhm.
and then you sell it for 417, you're still looking at a loss of approximately $24,000. That's
Yeah.
$417. You're subtracting out the 354 that you still owe. And then if you subtract out the 88,000 that you've already put in, you
Yeah.
look at you're looking at a net loss of about $24,000 roughly in this scenario. Now, what I would
Right.
encourage people to do is look at all these numbers for their own situation.
Right.
But in this scenario, you're looking at a loss. So then, of course, I played around with the spreadsheet and I said, well, shoot, well, how long, based on all these all-in costs and the ongoing payments before, selling a house would be profitable. Now, this is assuming the home keeps appreciating by 8.6% every year and that you keep making all those payments to the house. Year 7,
Uh,
if you were to sell the house by year 7, you would net a profit. And this is assuming at that point by year 7, the home value has grown to approximately 685,000, assuming somebody buys it for that much.
mhm.
But at that point, you would have your loan balance and your all-in payments would have been about 670,000. So year 7 is when you would net out a profit.
And that's, you often hear you want to plan to stay in a house for about 10 years in order to make some money. And I would say that really solidifies the idea that if you're planning to be there for 5 years, put that money into the stock market, because you've said before, generally looking at about a 10% return. Put that down payment, not even the all the other fees, put that down payment into the stock market and you're going to get more money back than if you invested in a home.
If the market cooperates, right?
Correct.
But yes, I mean, if we're with all of these, we're making assumptions that things are growing, that these assets are growing at a certain rate
Right.
of return, right? So
Right.
we're assuming that your home value or someone's willingness to pay for it will increase annually by 8.6%.
Right.
We know from history that these things fluctuate. Same thing with the stock market, it fluctuates. But assuming a 10% return after a year, 5 years, yes, we would assume that the down payment or the money that you would set aside would grow at a greater rate than what the home value grows. And then
And
it
you're
would give
not
you.
putting repairs into that rental and, you know,
Right. You're not paying for repairs. You're not paying for closing costs. In some cases, depending on the rental and where it is, you may not be paying HOA fees. Some rentals you don't have to pay for utilities. Some
right.
you do. So there are certainly some short-term benefits to renting over buying.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Well,
and then of course my pull is, but I love painting my walls.
oh, 100%. You know what I was doing last night?
Painting?
I was on YouTube looking at DIY fence building videos. Um,
Oh,
I don't know if you saw in my old house about 8 years ago, I took some time and built a fence that was a wooden, horizontal wooden
oh,
sort of
cool.
uh,
Yeah.
fence in the backyard and built it over the existing cinder block walls that were there. And then I bought cinder blocks and I built an L-shaped sofa bench in the backyard.
How
And so,
cool.
and then I strung these lights and then we paid to have the patio extended. Remember with the HOA lady
Right,
who was giving
right,
me a hard time? This was all the stuff that I did in the backyard. And so it created this like really beautiful little patio space for having friends over and having dinners. And, we had my wife's volleyball team over and we had friends over and we had parties back there. And those are things that you get to do when the space is yours.
Right, right.
And there's no financial explanation or validation, I guess, that would in some cases can trump that good feeling of being able to make a space your own.
And just to know that there is an oversight. I mean, even the HOA oversight feels frustrating for me. And not that I think there are a lot of benefits to HOAs, but when I was looking at rentals, because for a long time a long time, for 2 months I was looking to see if renting before and renting my home out and renting a home in the new location would be beneficial for me. And there was something like some kind of mindset for me that I didn't like the idea that it was someone else's home because I went in and wanted to change so many things. I wanted to build a new fence. I wanted to, if it's
Yeah.
interesting talking about fences, I wanted to paint the cabinets, things like that. So yeah, it just is, there's such an emotional connection to the home. And I am someone who spends a lot of time in my home. So if I didn't, I would feel probably very differently.
I'm the same. I mean, we love just being at the house. I mean,
Yeah.
we cook here. Like I said, we have friends here. Our daughter will invite her friends over. We like to entertain. We don't do it as much as we would like to, but we love to have people over and have parties and cook for people. My wife is comes from two cultures that love cooking for people all the time.
And she's good at it.
And she's good at it, yeah. And I love to have people in the yard and standing back there just grilling and talking and watching the kids play and you can do those things in a rental, but
Of course.
when you can make that space your own and then have people over, it's a much better feeling. Again, it's a feeling that you get, right? It doesn't necessarily equate to the financials, but it's an incredible feeling to be able to have people over and do that and entertain.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I want to go back to New Orleans is because all of that's kind of a cultural aspect of New Orleans is the gathering and the
Yeah.
being together and going to people's homes and cooking dinner and going out to eat too. And there's not a lot of time that you can spend outside in the summertime, but other parts of the year, it's quite lovely.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. I did want to get back really quickly though and touch on one more element of these numbers. Just
Oh, you
just when you
can't
thought
get
your
away
head was
from
going
that
to explode.
spreadsheet.
Well,
Can't get away from the
you
spreadsheet.
got me all jazzed up when you said we were talking numbers, so I think I'm gonna give you all you can handle.
Bring it. I'm excited. Tell me more.
So here's the other thing, and it relates to mortgage, and it relates to the interest rate in particular, and what you're paying in interest. And I just thought this was pretty fascinating. And again, anyone can pull these numbers. Like I said earlier, there are a ton of mortgage apps online, but on a $357,000 loan, okay, at a 6.78 interest rate over 30 years. Do you know how much of that you're actually paying in interest? I'm expecting you to just crank this number out
I
off the top
do.
of your head.
Isn't it like $400,000?
It is $480,302 over the life of that mortgage.
I
So you're actually
cheated.
paying more in interest than you would for the actual price of the home.
Chad told me that number before we
I
started
did.
recording,
I
by the
did.
way.
Well, but the reason I wanted to bring that up was because one of the things we haven't talked about was the benefit of making extra payments over the life of the loan. Just because your payment or your principal and interest payment is set at a certain level, and in this case it's $2,328. you can pay more to help over time to reduce the amount of interest that you pay. So one of the things that I had mentioned to you beforehand was even if you just made a lump sum payment at some point throughout the first year of the loan. And so what I did, I said, okay, well, in addition to the ongoing principal and interest payment and all the fees and everything else, if I was able to, what if I just made a one-time lump sum payment of $5,000 at some point in year one? You know how much that would save you over the life of the loan? It would
No,
save you almost $30,000 over the life of the loan. That one,
$5,000 turns
that,
into $30,000 savings
yeah,
over the life.
over the life of the loan, it would save you close to $30,000 over the life of the loan.
And if you could do that several times, then you're reducing that $480,000 number of the
Right,
amount of interest that you're paying over the life of loan.
right. And another way to look at it, if you're able to, depending on your cash flow, and again, this is where your cash flow management comes into play, instead of making a one-time lump sum payment at some point throughout the year, if you were able to just pay an extra $100 per month, so in addition to the 2,300, let's say your monthly payment, you're paying 24.28 instead of 23.28, and you just
Mhm.
make that payment consistently, that extra $100 payment per month would save you $67,000,
Wow.
almost $68,000 over the life of the loan, and would shorten your mortgage payments from 30 years to 26 years and 6 months.
Wow.
So the point is, there are benefits to making extra payments over the life of your loan. if
Yes.
if I haven't made that point clear, there are significant benefits to making extra payments. Not only does it shorten how long your mortgage period is, but it will save you significantly in interest. So cutting that $480,000 of interest, that's just what you're paying the bank for the loan. That doesn't go to your bottom line, but now you'd be paying closer to $412,000 over the course of the loan. So when able,
Hmm.
we would encourage people to make extra payments to save on that interest that you're paying on the loan.
Another long-term benefit that I think about just for myself is that my mortgage payment, it actually has gone up a little bit because insurance went up drastically in the state of Louisiana this past year. But not very much, just a little bit. But for the most part, your mortgage payment remains the same over
Mm-hmm.
the course of your loan, but life gets more expensive. And so rents increase, and you hypothetically will be getting raises and making more money. So not
Yes.
only are you able to sell your house and make a little money if you stay in it long term, but your cost of living can be greatly benefited. It might be a little harder cash flow wise in the first few years, but 10 years out, you're paying a 10-year-old mortgage payment that's very similar to the mortgage payments you were paying 10 years ago.
And that's an excellent point because over time, rents typically increase.
Right.
So what you're paying in rent today, if you stay in that house for 10 years, you may be paying significantly more, whereas your principal and interest on your loan will stay level. So you're
Right.
paying that same amount as your income increases over time and hopefully and all these other things. So
Exactly.
no, that's an excellent point. Um, so I think we spent so much time talking about the costs
Right.
of the home and which sounds somewhat negative, but I did want to go back because we have been talking about the home as an investment. And assuming someone holds on to this house that we've been using as the example house, the house that cost $384,000, and you've been making these payments as we've kind of outlined. And assuming you've stayed in that house for 10 years,
Mhm.
your profit, so this is after all of those all-in costs that you've made, your down payment, your closing costs, your principal and interest, your HOA fees, your insurance, all those things. After year 10, your actual profit, if you were to sell the home, so assuming also that same growth in the value of the home at 8.6%, your profit would be approximately $99,000 after
Okay.
year 10. Let's say you're not even thinking about that because you're raising kids and you're the house is your home and it's your forever home and and typically we're not thinking about the value of the home every single day, right? We're living in it, we're cooking in it, we're entertaining and we're doing all the fun things. Let's say we don't look at it for another 20 years and then you decide to sell it. With those same assumptions, your profit at year 20, $911,000.
Wow.
Remember in the last part one of this, we're saying, we don't look at the slow increases in the value of our home over time. We
Mhm.
really probably only look at it when we're ready to sell. And it's kind of like that nephew that we only see every few years. And we come back and we look at the nephew and we're like, oh my God, you've grown so much. And it's like, well,
Right.
I've actually just sort of been growing incrementally. You've just now seen me after 5 years. And that's very much like the home. So, going out to year 29, same assumptions, right? And again, things vary, but same assumptions. You sell that same home after 30 years, net profit $2.9 million.
Wow.
So there are long-term benefits to owning a home. And there is a wealth creation that does occur in owning a home. I would still argue that you take that same money and put it in the market and it would grow significantly more. But um, there are certainly long-term values to home ownership from a financial side. Absolutely. So, yeah,
It
I've
is.
reached the end of my spreadsheet.
It's like the end of the earth, the end of the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It's a lot to digest as someone who doesn't work in numbers all the time, but it is, like I said before, it really is, it's just essential to have all the information and to have someone walk you through the numbers. So I feel like this is really helpful for me and I mean, I own my house now, or I guess the bank technically owns it. I pay the bank for the pleasure of borrowing their money.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, you do.
and to do
And they're
that,
and they're grateful, by
yeah,
the way,
sure they are. They send me thank you cards and everything in the
and
form of,
birthday cards.
yes, they do send birthday
I
cards,
know.
actually. So, it's a lot to digest, but it is also, even when we were talking just about considerations, my thought process is what is most important to me and my family? What are the things that I want out of this? And prioritizing. So just like you would with your considerations, is location number one for you or is square footage number one for you? Or is design number one? What are the things that you value most? And those will drive your decision.
Well, and I think too, in your situation, there is a certain priceless component to being able to have that time with your parents.
Yes. Yes. Oh, do
And
you mean
so
moving
certain
in with
things you just
them
can't quantify.
temporarily, moving in with them?
But
No.
there's certain elements of that you can't
Yes.
quantify.
Right. Exactly. And there's a way of life that I'm buying. When I
Yeah.
buy my next house, I'm actually buying a way of life. And I plan for this to be it. This is my last home that I plan to buy.
Right.
I mean, who knows what'll happen? You never know. But this for me is an investment in the way I want to live my life, and that's how I'm prioritizing it. But
Yes.
but everyone does that a little bit differently. But I'm really glad that we went through this today, and as much as I joke about spreadsheets being stressful, it is very helpful to look at all the numbers and really understand the full picture. And I think you were able to paint a very full picture of the costs that go into both upfront and long-term costs of home ownership. And I'm just really grateful. I feel like we have done a pretty thorough job discussing this topic. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. I mean,
There's plenty more.
there's plenty more, and I'll finish with one last thing
Okay. Bring us home, Chad.
as I stick my arm up in the air that nobody can see. But I would encourage folks who are in the market and looking at buying homes, depending on the mortgage company that you're going with, depending on the development that you're looking into, I would encourage people to speak with their loan officers about opportunities to buy down their interest. So in
Ooh,
our case, because our house is new construction, the developer has their own lender. They are incentivizing you to use their lender and giving you options to buy down your interest. So we are trying to maximize that. So, for example, I mentioned before that the average 30-year loan is 6.78%. We right now are looking at potentially a 4.8 interest rate,
that's great.
which still higher than what it was before, but not as high as it is now.
Right.
But that same average home that we talked about, that's $384,000. And if you were financing a home at 357, your payment would drop from 2,300 per month to just under $2,000 per month. So about a
Wow.
$300 monthly decrease,
Hmm.
approximately, almost $400 monthly decrease, actually. But the total interest that you would pay over the life of that loan drops from 480 to 284. So you would
Wow.
be saving close to $200,000 in interest over the life of that loan by getting a lower rate. So again, I would encourage people to see if your mortgage lender is providing any kind of incentive or any kind of rate buy down option. It can really have a significant impact on the loan.
Must be rubbing off on me a little bit because I thought like, what if you took that $300 and put it towards your principal every month?
Yeah. Well, let me go back here for a second because I actually had that number a little bit off. You would actually your payment would actually drop. I still had the $100, the extra $100 a month factored in there.
Oh,
So
okay.
your actual monthly payment would be 1893, and your total interest paid would be 323, almost 324. So you're still saving a significant amount on the interest there.
Yeah. This
And
is
then
all.
that previous number would be if you paid an extra $100 a month. So
I
that other number is still not invalid. That's just if you did pay the 1993 instead of the 1893. But either way, the point still remains that getting that interest lowered, even if you're able to lower it 1% or 0.5%, can lead to thousands of dollars of savings over time.
absolutely. That's the
So
other thing that I'm giving up, Chad, my low interest rate.
yeah,
It's a bummer. Well,
but you're
thank you
gaining,
so
you're
much.
gaining.
But
You're,
yeah, no, I'm gaining a whole a life that I definitely
yeah,
a way of life and time with family, time with friends. Like there's
right. A lot
no
of that is worth it.
there is no comparison that yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, my words are falling failing me. So
Well,
Well, thank
I,
you so much, Chad. This has been really, really helpful, and I hope it's been helpful to our listeners as well.
I hope so. I think you're right. I think we have now exhausted this topic for
I know
now.
my brain hurts a little bit because of all the numbers, but and just kind of thinking about everything, but it's been really helpful. So
Yeah. Well,
I guess join us next week when we talk about more stuff.
yeah, we'll figure out what we're talking about next week. But until then, pay close attention to your wallets and pay close attention to how your finances are impacting you emotionally. With that, I would say goodbye and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, y'all. Bye-bye.